Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show on this Thursday, the 16th of June, 2022. Thank you for tuning in. Glad to have you guys here. Now, I want to get started right away, so I'm going to open up the charts right here. Take a look. The European Central Bank is going to create a new tool to address fragmentation risk and temper bond rout. What does that mean? Well, it means that the European Central Bank's bond market is it's at risk of fragmentation, and the American bond market's the same way, the Treasury market. And the Europeans are going to do something about it. They're going to create a new tool. This is basically yield curve control. That's what it is. Not basically, that's exactly what it is. We're going to have to wait and see if the American Central Bank follows suit when they get in trouble. But they're already starting to move toward very close to being in trouble with the long end of the yield curve. This is big. You have to depend and see on what they're going to do. But here's the thing, guys. The economy itself right now, this article says the economy is going to collapse, period. And I have to agree with this. In fact, there's even more to this than meets the eye. I think it's going to be more than a collapse. I think it's going to be a freeze, the entire Western economy. I think this has been in play for a long time. This is why the BRICS nations have went and created their own banking system, their own equivalent of the World Bank, and so on. The BRICS, which is Russia, China, the eastern part of the world. They have seen this coming for years. They've done the mathematical analytics on this, and they know, years ago they knew, that we were going to have a debt collapse because we're basically a Ponzi scheme. I mean, the easiest way to put it is the West is being run with a Ponzi scheme, and their computers that they have supercomputers they can work with. Probably told them almost about exactly how long a time they had. But they've been working on this for a long time, separating themselves, creating their own financial system, so that when ours collapses, because it's all a Ponzi scheme, and I'm talking about the whole Western world here, guys. I'm talking about as far away as Japan, as Australia. I'm talking about here in Canada, United States of America, Great Britain. We're talking about the whole Western civilized, what we call the civilized world, is all being run on a Ponzi scheme, centered and based in America, United States of America, with the U.S. Central Bank is the biggest, most powerful entity in this, being only rivaled next in power to the European Central Bank. So that's why we follow this. That's why we look at what the European Central Bank is doing with this article here. It says European Central Bank to create a new tool to address fragmentation risk in the bond market. I'm saying to myself, hey, if they adopt that in Europe, they very well might adopt it here. It's called yield curve control. So there's a very high probability that when our markets start to get in trouble, that they'll adopt yield curve control. But, that's not going to stop what's going to happen, because I'm just waiting now. I'm just sitting back here watching and waiting, watching the liquidity drain out of the Western financial system, and I'm saying, at what point do the bankruptcies start? And there'll be too many of them to control. They're going to freeze the system. They're going to create such a massive black hole of money not being there to cover everything that it expands. That expands extremely rapidly. It's basically like this. One entity, I'll call it an entity. It could be anybody out there. It could be a bank. It could be a big bank. It could. They go under. And they carry everybody that's connected to them down with them. And it might not start even here. It might start with someplace like you've been expecting it for years, Deutsche Bank to go under. Maybe they'll go under. Boom. That starts it. Starts the ball rolling. Or someplace we haven't seen. Somebody that we don't realize is going under right now. Right now they're going under, but they haven't manifested itself as a big news story. And all of a sudden, boom, they make the big news because they're going down. It's a Lehman moment. I'm expecting that any time now as they drain this liquidity out because it's a no-brainer. This has to happen. It's going to cause a credit freeze within the system. I'd say the probability of a credit freeze now, because I see how tight the Fed is, right? I see they're very, very, very tight right now with the money. And I'm saying to myself, hey, and they're draining money out of the system, and they're all gung-ho right now as we're moving into this financial storm or financial nightmare. I'm saying to myself, it's just a matter of time until entities start to go bankrupt, and it's going to expand quicker than they can control it. And because they're so gung-ho, before they change their attitude and say, hey, we're gonna start opening up the floodgates of money again, the system's going to suddenly go into this massive deleverage. And there's going to be margin calls all through the system. It's going to freeze. The markets are going to freeze. And it's just a thing where how long and how far out of control is it going to get? Or are they going to be able to unfreeze it or unlock it? Because if they can't unlock it in time, it's going to be SHTF. If they can't unlock it in time. And that's how dangerous our system is right now. And it's all man-made problems. It's war. It's war. It's a financial war that's been ongoing for years. And they've been sitting back and they've been planning and plotting against us. But it's all part of our own undoing as well for having a splurge of a 40-year credit binge. And not thinking we're never going to pay the piper. So, it says the economy is going to collapse, says Wall Street veteran. We're going into a really fast. I agree. It's going down so quick that you can't even keep up with it. Says veteran investor and Bitcoin bull Michael Novogratz doesn't see a rosy outlook for the economy, which he describes as heading for a substantial downturn with a likelihood of a fast recession on the horizon. It's already here. It's moving that fast. Says the economy is going to collapse. He says we are going into a really fast recession. And you can see that in a lot of ways, he said Wednesday on an interview before the Federal Reserve decided to undertake its biggest interest rate hike in nearly 3 decades. So see, they're gung-ho. They're taking it down. They're pulling the moorings out from underneath the foundation, out from under, and gravity's going to bring it down now at this point. I would say probably in the next 3 months we're gonna undergo something that we're gonna talk about for the next 200 years. And that's a freeze in the system. And when they totally freeze credit in the system, how are the trucks going to run to bring your food to the grocery store? If their bank is closed and they can't make payroll, they can't buy fuel. Because the bank they're connected to won't extend credit to them. How do you think they buy fuel nowadays? I know back in the 1970s, a trucker would drive up to the fuel station, okay, and he'd load his truck with fuel, and then he'd reach down into his wallet and he'd pull out some bills, paper money, to pay for it. That's how it used to be done, And where he got that money was that was part of the rolling expenditure of the company he was in. He would write that on how much the fuel cost was, and the boss back at the company, they would get the fuel costs. He would keep the receipts, and they would get the receipts, and so on. And they work it out that way. And they were connected to a bank, but not like they are now. It wasn't a constant revolving extension of credit. where they had debit cards and stuff that were connected to the company, or the company would roll in and he'd just slide a card through a machine and it would pay for the gas. That's not how it worked about 40 years ago. It was a much simpler system we had back then, but it functioned much better. Now, they all got the card. These truckers, they go in there and they open up their wallet and they pull out a card from their company that's a revolving line of credit, and they just slide it through the machine when they're done filling the truck. And it just beep and it says approved. And that's it. None of that's going to work when you get a credit freeze in the banking system, because they just basically do like they're doing in China right now. The people have no access to their money for months. It's going on for months. They're outside the banks and they got picket signs and they're like bank runs, they call it. We got bank runs coming here. And so everything ceases to function. And so that's when your grocery stores go empty. And if that's allowed to continue, it'll cause an SHTF if it's allowed to continue. Now, the big question mark here is, what's the Fed going to do about it? They're causing it to happen. But once it happens, it's going to be a different situation. That's going to cause a panic. And they're going to be required to make it better. How are they going to handle that? And can they handle that? And just exactly what's it going to take? I can't see any other way out. They're going to have to allow the system to remain frozen until they liquefy the system again, until they make it liquid. And how they do that is by going back and printing money again and injecting it in the parts of the system that need it in order to unfreeze the system. And how long is that going to take? I'm not exactly sure, because this sudden freeze is going to be what didn't happen in 2008. This time it's going to happen. They come close to having it happen in 2008, but they were able to avert it. This time it's going to happen. It's going to be a meltdown. It's going to be a lock-up and freeze. And I think it's only a couple months away. A couple more rate hikes away. And boom, it's going to hit suddenly. It's going to be an overnight sort of thing. Probably happen on a weekend. Friday night, your bank card will work. Monday morning, your bank it'll have chains around the door. And it'll be a big, well, it won't be a big closed sign, but everybody will know it's closed. Your bank. And you'll go to use your debit card and it ain't going to function. It's going to be a lockup in the entire system. That's what's coming. I don't see them leaving it locked. I think they will get it unlocked, the system. But it might take 2 weeks. It might take a month. Gosh knows how slow government is. But in an emergency, they do speed up. They get things done a lot quicker. But, I mean, ultimately, if they do unlock it, it's going to require a lot of injection of new, fresh fiat into the system. And that's going to put us more toward inflation like we've ever been before. And when they unlock it, that's when you're going to see gold and silver and the cryptos really take off, because that new money coming into the system, that new fresh liquidity, is going to say to everybody out there, they're never going to let this thing roll over. They're never going to let it deleverage. They're just going to keep pumping it higher and higher and higher. It's like the end of a diet. The best way for me to explain it is when they fix this situation, it's like a dieter who says, they say they're sick, say they're 500 pounds or whatever, and they say, I'm never eating again. And the guy's watching them, and he's saying, and sure enough, the first day they don't eat nothing. All they do is drink water. It's a fast. And all they do is drink water and stuff. And then another day, and they continue with it. And they start to lose weight. But the guy sitting there in the background, he says, now they weighed 500 pounds, and a week later they only weigh 460 or 470, and they're coming down, they're losing weight and everything, but they said they're never eating again. You just know, at a certain point, they're going to pass out or something. And when that happens, they're going to go back to eating. And they're going to not only gain it all back, they're going to gain more. than they ever were. Bigger, it'd be 550 by the time they're done, or instead of 500. And that's what we're looking at here. It's going to take a credit freeze in the system to wake the central bank up and make them, the panic of that is going to make them turn. And I think it's going to take a credit freeze at this point. I've been watching them now for a number of weeks, and I never seen them so gung-ho to try to fight inflation. Even though the markets, I expected by now, the market's down as far as it's down thousands of points. I expected them to have a softer tone. No, they're worse than ever. And this is a bit of a surprise to me. The fact that they're holding the line this tight. So now what I'm telling you guys is, I was kind of skeptical on whether they would let it go as far as a credit freeze before. Now I'm saying to myself, hell yeah! They're going to hold the line until they get their credit freeze. And how is that going to impact all of us? It's going to be the most terrifying time of your life. And you say, well, why? Why is that terrifying? Because basically, it's going to close almost everything. And the few places that do stay open are only going to take cash because the credit's frozen. I mean, everything runs on credit now. I mean, everybody uses these debit cards or uses a credit card or nobody hardly uses cash anymore, and all of that's going to cease to function. This is what the $5 bills are for. I've been getting you guys to put away. Because if there are a few places open that only take cash, you will be able to utilize that. And some of the bigger outfits, they might close up because they can't take credit. During the days they can't take credit, they probably end up closing up. Maybe they can't make payroll or anything. So basically the system's just about going to shut down when this thing happens. It's very likely that this will be such a panic situation that it could cause emergency powers to come into effect. Here in Canada, all in the West, every country of the Western world, emergency powers. If you don't know what those are, there are things like, well, we had that happen here in Canada for a few days. They had to enact emergency powers. It's a wartime thing, or if the country's threatened by something. And believe me, a credit freeze is a huge threat to the whole Western world. It's a situation that the Federal Reserve will be called upon to rectify. At that point, that's when they'll be forced to turn. And they've told you all along they're data dependent. That'll be the data that says, hey, you know what? You guys got to go back to the printing press. But then on the other side of that, when we advance on the other side of that, you're just going to see inflation soar. I mean, it's going to double overnight from what it is now. Triple, quadruple. Tell me what I'm missing here. I'm not missing anything. I can't see it going in any other direction. I'm just waiting now. I'm sitting back here and I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. I'm waiting for the first big players out there in the financial system to start going bankrupt as the Fed draws liquidity out. They can't stay solvent. Now, okay, I do understand that after the last financial crisis, the Fed went in there and the banking system that exists, the big banks in the United States, they have charged them up with so much liquidity and done so many stress tests on them, they'll probably go through this thing without becoming insolvent. The really big banks. But all the rest, I mean, out there, this thing's going to really freeze them up. And during this period in time, even those big banks that are well, they've got a lot of liquidity, that the Fed's basically, they might not go under, but what'll happen is they'll have to freeze their credit within the system as well. Anyway, let's get in there and let's take a look at what's going on with the price of silver today. $21.54. It's down 13 cents. So now you guys know what I'm waiting for now. I'm waiting for the bankruptcies to start. pretty soon, as all this liquidity pours out of the system. Basically, it's like if it was a patient. I'm a doctor, okay? And it's a patient, and he's losing blood really fast. And say, well, doctor, what are you waiting for? Well, he says, I'm waiting for the blood pressure to drop, and I'm waiting for the patient to lose consciousness or whatever, because he's losing a lot of blood. That's what's going to happen. I mean, it's like it's like I'm a financial doctor, and I'm watching the system right now, and it's bleeding really fast. And I'm just a waiting game now. When's this going to lock up? When's the first player's just going to run out of money and run out of liquidity, and they have to and it starts margin calls, and it starts to spread through the system. Contagion through the system. That's what I'm waiting for right now. They've got us to this point. The Chinese over there and the Russians and stuff, they got their own financial system now. They might not lock up. In fact, they probably won't when the West locks up. Why do you think they put those banks in? That was a strategic move in this financial war that's been ongoing for years. A strategy. They don't want to go down with us when we sink. 1829 for gold. Okay, it's down 530. Take a look at silver today. Silver 21.49, down 18 cents. Now we're going to take a look at cryptos, which has been doing awfully bad lately. 912, 895. This is the first time it's dropped into the 800s for a while. 20,883. It's just clinging above 20,000. Oh boy, it's really showing that this is a speculative investment. When times are bad, she really suffers. But you know, anyway. Dow Jones Industrial Average. Let's refresh the page here. It's down 715 points today. It's down under 30,000 now, 29,953. I was thinking they were going to stop this thing at 26,000. I'm not so sure now. The Fed's poker face, they're a little bit more determined to continue this fight of inflation than I thought they were. Now, I think that if this market rolls down to 26,000, they might still be determined. They're going to wait until we get this massive, like the 2008 event, except this time they're not going to bail it out. They're going to let it collapse. And when it collapses, then they'll bail it out, because it freezes the system and they have no choice. It's going to create a crisis then. And that's where we're headed. I can't say this enough, guys. I can't stress this enough. You need to have some food on the side, because when we get this freeze, could come suddenly too, at any time now, moving forward, because the money's draining out of the system so fast. We could start to see the bankruptcies start to roll in any time now. Big ones. And just the system lock right up, because it's run on computer. It happens at the speed of light. Could start any time. Oil, 114. It's down $1 today. Do you think the price of oil comes down from 120 where it was? Do you think they'll drop down to 114? Do you think they'll drop 1 penny at the pumps? No, they got a good thing going. They're ripping you guys off. And they got a good thing going. Move index today, 135.93. So it has come down. It was up over, I think, over 140. But I told you guys this thing could shoot up quick. And this is your credit markets. And probably the reason why it's come down that little bit is liquidity was probably injected into the system to bring those bond yields down a little bit. There. Remember they dropped 10 basis points? Well, there you're seeing it right in the move index. That little bit of liquidity is dumped in. And this is another indicator, I would say, that it's probably something to do with the Fed. Maybe they're not buying directly. Probably something, but fresh liquidity injection probably brought that down a little bit right there. From what was it, Anyway, it brought it down to 135. Brought it down. See that little thing right there? Come down just a little bit. And liquidity injections as needed. The U.S. dollar index 104.70. And so at the same time, this little drop, the dollar was gung-ho, made it all the way up to 105 point something. What was it, 105.43 or something? No, 105.45. And it's dropped back down to 104.71. It's probably that little liquidity injection. There's probably another indicator. I'm thinking, I'm not sure about that. Anyway, thank you guys for listening to my show. Like and subscribe. Stay prepared, guys. Remember my Patreon channel. Financial Turmoil Explained in the Patreon that'll come up. It's only $1 a month. It helps support my channel. Really appreciate you guys joining up on Patreon over there. And we'll catch you guys in the next show. And you guys have a great day. Bye-bye.